Today's video is a rather interesting topic. Today, we're looking at the top 10 greatest journeymen in the history of the NBA. Now, some of you might be asking, how do you define a journeyman? Well, essentially, it's an NBA player who played for a lot of different organizations within his time in the league. So then a follow-up question might be, how many teams did that player have to play for? Well, according to Basketball Reference, there have been 264 players in the league's history who have played for at least 7 different teams. And if you shrink that just down to 6 teams, that number increases dramatically. So that's where I'm making the cutoff. Each player on this list had to have played for at least 7 teams throughout his career. And there's several different factors into how I'm making this list. For one, he has to be a great player. But 2, it isn't just about how good he was as an individual player, but it's also about how good he was on several different organizations. If he spent the majority of his time with just one team, and then started team hopping late in his career and didn't really have much of an impact for those different organizations, then he won't move as high up the list. So not only does it help to be great, but it helps to have a major impact on multiple organizations. So without further ado, let's get into it. Number 10, Tyson Chandler. This 7-foot power forward had a tremendous impact on several different organizations, as he was consistently one of the best defensive players in the entire game. In 2011, he won the NBA championship with the Dallas Mavericks, and the very next season, he was the Defensive Player of the Year for the New York Knicks. In total, he played for 8 different organizations and had a tremendous impact on most of them. He didn't really have the best offensive game, but he was a great option for lob passes. Number 9, Mark Jackson. He played for 7 different teams throughout the course of his career, and was the Rookie of the Year for the New York Knicks in 1988. He really broke out as one of the premier point guards in the entire league when he played for the Indiana Pacers. And in 1997, he led the entire league in assists per game at 11.4. He had a long career that had a tremendous impact for multiple different organizations, and was even an NBA All-Star in 1989. If you ask me, he's one of the most underrated playmakers that the game has ever seen. Number 8, ISO Joe Johnson. He was one of the most clutch players throughout his playing days, and was always a sure thing to make a play for himself, as this guy was a walking bucket on the court. In his career, he made 1 All-NBA team in 2010, and he made 7 All-Star teams. As a 6'7" wing, he was one of the best scorers that the league had to offer, as he got as high as 25 points per game in 2007 as a member of the Atlanta Hawks. But both before and after that, he was one of the best late-game finishers, as he had a significant impact on both the Phoenix Suns and the Brooklyn Nets. Number 7, Adrien Dantley. This 6'5" small forward played for 7 different teams throughout his playing days, and during the 1980s, he was one of the best and most efficient scorers in the entire league. For his career, he averaged 24.3 points per game on 54% shooting, which would be incredibly impressive even by the efficiency standards of a center. But for a small forward, it's basically unheard of. In a 4-year stretch from 1981 to 1984, he averaged 30.5 points per game while hitting 56.4% of his shots, and this was during his prime with the Utah Jazz. But he also had some seasons where he was effective with the Los Angeles Lakers, and eventually, in a reduced role, he would have a major impact on the Detroit Pistons. He was the game's Rookie of the Year in 1977, he was a 6-time All-Star, and a 2-time scoring champion. He's definitely one of the more underappreciated players of the game's past. Number 6, Vince Carter. Half man, half amazing. Vinsanity, as you all know, was an absolute problem with the Toronto Raptors. But he was a guy who was a legitimate superstar during his prime, and was still able to adjust to becoming a solid role player in the latter half of his career. He's recognized by most as the greatest dunker in NBA history, but he was so much more than just that, as he was an elite 3-point shooter, both in terms of volume and efficiency. After Toronto, he remained one of the best players in the Eastern Conference, as he averaged as high as 25 points per game with the New Jersey Nets in 2007. He made 8 All-Star teams, and his career lasted all the way to the age of 43. He's now an NBA Hall of Famer, and early in his career, many people were calling him the next Michael Jordan. But now, he'll have to settle for titles like the greatest dunker of all time and one of the greatest journeymen that the game has ever seen. Number 5. Dwight Howard. The first half and best half of his career were with the Orlando Magic, where he led the NBA in rebounds per game 5 times, and he led the league in blocks per game twice. He also led his Orlando Magic to the NBA Finals in 2009, and to go along with his 8 All-Star selections, he was the NBA's Defensive Player of the Year 3 times. Obviously, he's most famous for his days in Orlando, but he remained solid in the years afterwards, even if he wasn't as appreciated as he should have been. Eventually, he would win an NBA championship ring with the Los Angeles Lakers in 2020, as he was a tremendous spark for them off the bench, both offensively and defensively. Number 4. Rajon Rondo. He played for 9 different teams throughout his career in the NBA, and he was known for several things. For one, he was one of the best playmakers in the entire league, and he was known as a guy who took his game to another level in the NBA playoffs, and he was doing that year in and year out for a bunch of different organizations. He is the only player in NBA history to win an NBA championship with both the Boston Celtics and the Los Angeles Lakers, as he won with Boston in 2008, and he won with the Lakers in 2020. He made 4 All-Defense teams in his career, and he was the NBA Steals champion with the Celtics in 2010. But he also did an excellent job having an impact on teams like Chicago, Sacramento, and New Orleans. And even with the Kings in 2016, he led the NBA in assists per game at 11.7, which, combined with his seasons where he played with the Celtics, was the 3rd time that he led the NBA in assists per game. Number 3. Chauncey Billups. Mr. Big Shot had a tremendous impact on a bunch of different organizations during his playing days. He's an NBA Hall of Famer, he was a 5-time All-Star, he was a 2-time All-Defender, and he was the 2004 NBA Champion and Finals MVP with arguably the greatest defensive team of all time, the 03-04 Detroit Pistons. Obviously, he was huge for that Pistons squad. But afterwards, he was also the 2nd best player for a Denver Nuggets team that nearly made it to the NBA Finals in 2009. For a bunch of different organizations, Mr. Big Shot provided plenty of victories and plenty of massive moments, as he was one of the best floor generals and floor raisers that the game had to offer. Number 2. Bob McAdoo. This guy is an NBA Hall of Famer, and simply put, he was one of the greatest scorers that the league has ever seen, as he had masterful footwork and was a mid-range artist. He was a 5-time All-Star and won 3 scoring titles, and he was even the NBA MVP in 1975. In fact, throughout the 1970s, he was the guy who was most frequently challenging Kareem Abdul-Jabbar for the title of the best player in the entire league. With the Buffalo Braves, he got as high as 34.5 points per game in 1975. But in the years afterwards, he would also be a premier player for the New York Knicks, and eventually, he would win a couple championship rings with the Los Angeles Lakers. He put on many different jerseys throughout his career, but there was never a time where this journeyman wasn't effective for the team that had him. Number 1. Moses Malone. Without question, this guy is the greatest journeyman in the history of the game, and beyond that, he's one of the greatest players to ever play at the center position. His nickname was the Chairman of the Boards, and that was because he was one of the greatest rebounders of all time, but specifically as an offensive rebounder, it's not even close, as he is clearly the best ever in that aspect. He's an NBA Hall of Famer. He was a 13-time All-Star, he was a 6-time rebounding champion, made 8 All-NBA teams, 2 All-Defense teams, and his Philadelphia 76ers won the NBA championship in 1983, and he was the Finals MVP. To this day, that 76ers team is widely recognized as one of the greatest basketball teams of all time. Beyond that, he was also a 3-time league MVP, and is the only player in NBA history to win back-to-back MVP awards with 2 separate teams, which he did with the Houston Rockets in 1982 and the Philadelphia 76ers in 1983. It's rather incredible and somewhat puzzling that Moses was able to find his way onto so many different organizations throughout his career, especially considering the fact that for a while, he was the best player that the game had to offer. Regardless, at the end of the day, Moses Malone is easily the greatest journeyman in NBA history. Here is my list of honorable mentions. Should any of these players have made the list instead? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.